I'm going to try and start, since it's a formal committee meeting, I'm going to try and start on time, and just want to make sure that everybody who's in the room did in fact sign the yellow sheet of paper that you couldn't miss on the table as you came in, so that we know who's here and the correct spelling of names. That will be of great assistance later. And I will also add that during this meeting, because it is a formal beach committee meeting, there will be 2 different opportunities for public comment. The first will take place after the presentations, and the second will take place at the end of our small group gathering, coming back and sharing what they've figured out that we want to work on. So it gives the public 2 different times to give 2-minute maximum inputs. And we will be having to keep to that. So I hope that you'll please go along with our format. Thank you so much. I want to welcome everybody and thank everybody. I want to also tell you that it's been a hot summer day. We do have in that cooler bag back there cans of still water. The cookies will come out at the midpoint when we go into small group sessions. But until that time, you're welcome to help yourself to a can of water. And I also would like to thank all the staff that's here for giving extra time today to be here and staying late on a work day. Really appreciate you helping the beach committee gather information. I'd also like to introduce some important people that are in the room. I'll start with our new town manager. Mike Renfrew is here, and thank you so much for being here. And his wife, welcome. We're glad to see you're here and learning about our beaches and all the problems of them. Thank you. Peter Johnson-Staub is here, our assistant town manager, and somebody who really did a great job keeping us up afloat. How about that, afloat for a long time. I will also want to introduce Doug Brown, who's here, and Bob Maselli, who are here from the select board. Thank you. Doug has been the beach representative from the select board for how many years now, Doug? A lot. Quite a long time. So he's been following all of this right for a long time. The beach committee, I'd also like to introduce. So we have Lynn Chad, Mark, say hi, Heather, Trish, and Nancy are all here in the front. We've got also Joe, you met as he came in, and me. So we're here today to listen and to try and gather information. I hope that's okay with everybody's timing, but that's what we're going to be doing, gathering information. At the front, I'd like to introduce the 3 guest speakers who are going to be giving you a lot of information to get us up to speed on what we have at our fingertips for resources. Leslie Fields is sitting right here. She is a coastal geologist and marine environmentalist. Leslie's with the Woods Hole Group. She's been a Falmouth resident for a long time, and I want you to know that the Woods Hole Group was responsible for the 2008 beach management plan and the work that went into it. So she's very familiar with the plan that exists on the books and where it's gone and where it can still go. David Price is here. He is a Chief USA pilot. He is with GPI, which is Greenman Pedersen Incorporated. He works with aerial imagery and data for civil engineering projects, and that includes all types of things like survey mapping, structure inspections, construction updates throughout the Northeast. We're really glad. I think you're going to enjoy his presentation. And Rebecca Haney is here, taking time to be here as a coastal geologist from the Massachusetts Office of Coastal Zone Management, or otherwise known as CZM. And she is, if you want to hear the things that it lists, she's a specialist in coastal processes, coastal hazards, erosion, flooding, storms and storm damage, shoreline change, barrier beaches, beach and dune nourishment, federal emergency management agendas, and flood insurance rate maps. Now, if that isn't everything that we need to hear about, I don't know what is. But thank you for your expertise and bringing it here to the table. At this time, I would like to start by having Leslie Fields give us a presentation on the 2008 management plan, how it came to be, and some of the points that you might want to know about it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Barbara. Let's see here. Is it already open? Yes. All right. So as Barbara said, Woods Hole Group worked under contract to the town of Falmouth back in 2008 to prepare a beach management plan. And I'm just going to walk you through what that plan included and finish by going over some of the recommendations that were in the plan. So we looked exclusively at the town-owned public beaches. So all 8 of them, from Megansett up in the north on Buzzards Bay side, down through Old Silver, both sides of Old Silver, Chappie, Woodneck Beach, and then down on the south side, Surf Drive, Falmouth Heights, Bristol, and Minot. We didn't look at any of the freshwater beaches in the town, just the coastal beaches, saltwater beaches. And so what we did at each one of those sites was we inventoried all the natural resources and mapped what wetland resources were there. You know, whether or not the beaches were mapped for endangered species. We took sediment samples. We characterized the grain size, you know, sediment characteristics of the beaches. We did some topographic mapping of elevations, and we looked at the rates of historical shoreline change and sediment transport patterns. So whether or not the sediment is moving, you know, to the east or west or north or south predominantly. We tried to identify those things as well. And then we also mapped all the anthropogenic features. So by that I mean any sort of structures, groins, revetments, jetties, and then we also mapped the parking lots and fencing and things like that, stormwater drainage features and the buildings. And then finally we met with the beach committee at that time, which is really quite different in composition from the beach committee today. I think it's been a complete turnover. So we met with the beach committee and just learned about the types of services that the town offers at each of these beaches. You know, lifeguards, concessions, restrooms, you know, trash pickup, things like that. And we documented that for each of the beaches. We also spent a little bit of time looking at the management structure of you know, how the town runs the beaches. And so we quantified what each of the different town departments and committees does for the beaches. So, you know, ranging from Board of Selectmen, town manager, beach committee, DPW, Concom, I think there was one other that we looked at. And so we just sort of defined what each of those boards and committees does in order to help advance, you know, the work at the beaches. We also looked a little bit at the revenue and the expenses. So back at this time, what we found is that the beaches were making money for the town of Falmouth. I don't know what the situation is today, but back at that time, I think the last data point we had was 2008, and so it was a $30,000 surplus that the beaches were bringing in for the town of Falmouth. So then I think the most important thing for this meeting is, you know, the recommendations that we came up with. We broke the recommendations down into these 7 categories here. So there was management and planning level activities, infrastructure, maintenance and improvement, monitoring, you know, like I think we're going to hear a little bit from David about, you know, monitoring changes at the beaches, rates of erosion and changes in elevation, things like that. Routine maintenance activities, restoration activities, which I think is an important one that hopefully we can focus on some today here. Education and enforcement, and then opportunities for fundraising to support all these recommendations. This is a picture, I think, of, I think that's Woodneck, right? Yeah. Okay, so in terms of, so on the next few slides, I'm going to go through each one of these categories, and I'm just listing a few of the recommendations. I'm not giving you all of them, just sort of the highlights. So these were some of the management and planning level activities. So add a coastal scientist or engineer to the beach committee. Maybe someday when I retire, I can volunteer to work on the beach committee and help out in that regard. But there's plenty of other scientists in town who can also do that as well. So hopefully, you know, you can add that expertise. Establish a record-keeping system just for monitoring data that you're collecting and how often the beaches have been restored. We also do a lot of work for the Harbor Master's office, and so, you know, we know that there's dredging in the inlets and harbors, and then a lot of times that material will be placed on the beaches as beneficial reuse. And so it's just a good idea to sort of keep record of all that activity that's happened, what the volumes are and where that material's been placed. And then also just records of storm damage that occurs. We also made a recommendation for the beach committee to provide annual notices to the Concom at the beginning of each season. These are the things we need to do each season in order to get the beach ready. The other thing was to maintain permits with the Concom. So one thing I don't have in this presentation, but something we did. So once we finished this plan, then we were contracted by the town to develop a notice of intent to file with the Conservation Commission to get an order of conditions to allow the beach committee to do all the things on the beach that they do every year. And that was maintained for a couple of years, so back when Don Hoffer was around and then Bruce McGardo. I don't know if that order of conditions is valid anymore, but it's definitely something that should be, you should get another order of conditions to allow you to do all the things you're doing. We also recommended developing pre- and post-storm response plans. So what that means is, you know a storm's coming, what are you going to do? You're going to go out there and get all the, the lifeguard stands off the beach. You're going to go remove anything that's going to get blown away or swept away. And then what might you do afterwards if you see a lot of erosion and storm damage? We recommended that you update your FEMA hazard mitigation plan. That has been done, so you've got that good to go for another 5 years. And then do an engineering study of some of the culverts and jetties along Surf Drive. So I know that the engineering department has got something going for, DPW's got something going for Salt Pond. And then we at Woods Hole Group just put in a grant application to CZM to study the Fresh River system. So we hope to hear about that in the next couple weeks. Hopefully that'll be positive. Town will get that grant and we can conduct a study for that. Under the infrastructure, maintenance and improvement activities, upgrade wastewater disposal system at Old Silver Beach. I don't know if that's been done, but that was a recommendation. Yeah, okay. Relocate the water line at Minot Beach. Yeah, I don't know if that was done. Yep, done, okay. Eliminate direct discharge of stormwater at Falmouth Heights Beach. Maybe not. I'm not quite sure if that was done. Renovate and upgrade the bathhouse and concessions building at Old Silver and Surf Drive. Again, I don't know the status of a lot of these, but that could be something we could discuss. Relocate those storage vaults outside of the resource areas. There are a couple that are just right smack dab in the middle of the dunes. They should be moved over to the edge of the parking lot or something like that where you can allow the dune to respond more naturally to wind-blown sediment transport. And then install seasonal showers. I think that was done at most of them. Yeah. So the town's done a really good job on this list here. Monitoring activities, biannual beach profile and photo surveys. I don't know how often David's doing this monitoring, but I expect we'll hear, what he's doing soon. And I think that sort of checks the box there. Condition surveys every once in a while of the coastal engineering structures. We recommended that as a way just to maintain those structures that are there. And then the shorebird surveys at the beaches that are in natural heritage habitat, and I think Mark would probably say that that's being done regularly, yeah. And then routine maintenance activities, so pre and post season activities to open and close the beaches. I talked a little bit about that. Maintaining the parking lots and the fencing. Beach raking, I don't know to the extent at which you guys are doing that. You are, okay. And then we had noted in the plan that at Chappie, that needed to be done by hand. I don't know if that's what's going on now, but yeah, okay. Clean catch basins. I think the DPW does a really good job of going around, and they've got a program for regularly maintaining the catch basins. And then we'd also recommend installing temporary sand fencing at some of the beaches just to be able to capture some of that wind-blown sediment that's moving around in the winter. So you could install them in the winter and then, take them down more in the summer. Restoration activities, we'd recommended installing sand fencing around a lot of the dunes, so at the toe of the dune, just going there every year really and looking to see the condition of the sand fencing. Does it need to be reinstalled? Does it need to be sort of reinstalled so that there's more of it sticking up above the surface of the beach so that it can catch more sand? We had recommended dune restoration at Surf Drive, Bristol Beach, and Minot. I know that at Minot and Surf Drive, those two beaches have received sand from the dredging of the nearby harbors and waterways. I think some of it was probably put on the beach at Surf Drive, but it's been, put to good use. That recommendation for dune restoration really was more of just sort of maintaining the dunes so that they're a good buffer from waves and increased water levels. But this next recommendation is sort of a larger beach nourishment project at Chappie, Surf Drive, and Minot. And so I will say that in the plan, we came up with some design criteria for number 2, the dune restoration part. And that was permitted through that order of conditions that the town got. So you could, in theory, have gone and restored those dunes and built them according to those cross-sections that we provided. We did not provide any sort of design for the larger beach nourishment work. That, in our mind, was like a separate sort of order of conditions that you would need to get from the Conservation Commission. It's all right. So that larger beach nourishment project recommendation is something that you would need to, have a design for from an engineer and permit that separately as a sort of standalone, project with an order of conditions. I will say that along Surf Drive, that was also a recommendation in the Surf Drive Resiliency Report. And I think that's something that should be really strongly considered, just putting in a plug for that. So the town hasn't done any of those larger beach nourishment projects at any of those locations. At Minot, the town does have a plan and some permits, all but one, I believe, for a big project at Minot. I think that work is planned really well, and you just got to wait for that permit, and then the town can execute that project, and that will sort of check the box there for a larger beach nourishment and sort of reconfiguration of that beach. Improved management of sediment dredge from the salt pond entrances. So that's geared more towards those entrances down at Fresh River and maybe Salt Pond, where they have to be dredged out, sometimes once a month. Because they get clogged with sediment when we have winds from the southwest. And so that material just gets sort of piled right next to the jetties, and so the recommendation was spread it out on the beach or put it along the toe of the dune so that it's not as easily pushed right back into the channel again. So that was a recommendation there, just improve management of that sediment that's dredged from those salt pond entrances. Number 5 is beneficial reuse of sand dredged from the navigation channels. I think the town's doing a great job of that. That's all within the town's comprehensive permits for dredging and beach nourishment. We did some work for the town, or the work for the town, to try to get those permits. And we have all permits but the final one from the Army Corps of Engineers, so we're just waiting on that permit. And then the town will be back in business of maintaining the harbor entrances and putting material on the beaches. And then just maintaining the dunes with like vegetation. After there's some sort of erosion from a storm event, you can go in and plant more beach grass. We also recommended in some places minimizing the number of paths that cross the dunes to get from, say, the parking lot to the beach or from the road to the beach. I'm thinking mainly of Surf Drive. Minimize the number of paths down there and reorient them so that they're not, facing the direction that most of the winds and waves are coming through. So they're not a direct conduit for waves coming right through those access paths. I think this is the last slide here, but this is just education and enforcement. So, update signage at some of the beaches and work harder at enforcing the dog regulations on the public beaches. We worked hard to develop a list of fundraising activities, and when I looked at it today, it was kind of out of date. So I think maybe Rebecca will be able to tell us about some other grant opportunities that, the town can pursue for some of these projects. But there is a lot of money out there, honestly, for projects to build resiliency along these beaches. And so I think, the town should be pursuing those opportunities. And that's really it. So Barbara, do you want to wait until the end? Okay, all right. So I'm going to exit out of here.
Thank you so much. And I just want to introduce Maggie Clayton, who's our beach superintendent that came in late because she's been in business meetings. So thank you for being here, Maggie. At this time, David's going to give us a presentation about, you've heard about some of the measuring and monitoring and so on that has been recommended in the 2008. David's going to talk a little bit about what his company's been able to add to that kind of monitoring.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Price. I work for a civil engineering company called GPI, Greenman Peterson, as was just mentioned. And let me pull up my PowerPoint right here and go there, there. So this project for us started actually out of COVID. And hopefully my slides might be advancing automatically by accident. I'm just going to jump right to this one right here. Sorry about that. Okay. This project started actually during COVID with the goal of first using a drone to map the beach with the parking spaces to determine the size of each beach, and then because of social distancing requirements, how many parking spaces could be filled at each beach, and that would satisfy the need for the proper distancing. Almost instantly we realized that this project afforded us the opportunity to show Falmouth how the beaches were changing shape over time. What a lot of people don't realize is that with the use of a drone for survey, I brought the drone with me today. This is the one that I actually fly here in Falmouth over these beaches. When you go out to do a traditional survey at a beach, you're only going to get as many points as a survey crew can gather. And if you've seen survey crews inside of a row with a tripod, so if it's two tripods, you're going to get 2 points, maybe to a third or fourth point. After a whole day of surveying a small area, you're left with maybe a few dozen points where you can measure from point to point. The advantage of a survey with a drone is that when the drone flies overhead, it can gather millions and millions of points, meaning that millions of points could be measured to any other point within that area that you've captured imagery of. So let me put that one down right here. So that's how this project began. And so what we have done is we started to map out every single beach. The first beach here is Chappie Beach. And what you're seeing is a screenshot from the software that we utilize. The software is called Drone Deploy. And this is the survey mapping software that we chose to use for this project for all 8 beaches. I just wanted you to see a little bit of what the flight looks like. So for this long Chappie Beach, you can see those green lines, which are called transects. And those transects are the grid lines that the drone is going to follow. This really nifty drone flies at a speed of about 33 miles per hour, and it takes a picture every 0.7 seconds. So it's just click, 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 click. 20 megapixels for each photo, and each photo overlaps with the next photo by about 80%. So there's a heavy, heavy overlap with all the pixels between the pictures. So at the end of a flight, and if you can look up on the top, right here, you'll see that this Chappie Beach area is around 33 acres, and it's going to capture around 428 images. Those 428 images all get stitched together, and then you're left with something called an ortho photo, or to say it in a fancy way, multi-stereo orthomosaic photogrammetry. That's the full term. We just call it an ortho photo. The thing that really freaked me out when I first started flying drones a long time ago, about 7 or 8 years ago, was I couldn't understand how you could get a 3D image or a 3D model or a 3D surface out of something that's just taking flat photos. But because you're taking a photo from here and a photo from here, well, now you can start to triangulate. And that's what's happening. All these pixels are getting triangulated to every other pixel. So let me just go on. I'll show you the rest of the beaches now. You can see right there, it's a flight altitude of about 200 feet. And for this particular beach, using an older drone that I was using, the one beach I could survey in about 22.5 minutes. Doesn't mean I'm in the field for 22.5 minutes, because I'm also putting down what's called ground control. Ground control is a point on the ground where we know the exact latitude, longitude, and height. And we're talking to within a couple of millimeters or less than an inch. So that's the first beach there, Chappie Beach. The next one is Bristol Beach. You can see the time has been reduced greatly because it's so much smaller. It's only 9 acres, 128 pictures, 8 minutes and 5 seconds. And then Falmouth Heights Beach, which is here, 165 pictures, 13 acres. Meganset Beach, 8 acres, 118 pictures. I might say beaches incorrectly, I apologize. Manahont? What's that? How do you guys say it? No, Manahont. Oh, okay. And up in Situate, they say Minot. And that's what, and I've drawn the whole shoreline up there, so I have two beaches with same name, different pronunciation. Old Silver. Okay, I said that right. 214 images, about 17 acres. Surf Drive Beach and Woodneck Beach, which is, for some reason, it's one of my favorites. It's just such a nice natural area to be. It's one of the places I enjoy the most. It's nice and quiet there. What the drone has allowed us to do is, because we have flown these beaches around 4 times now, and our goal, and that goes to your question, Leslie, how often? Our original goal was to fly about twice a year. It has been a bit of a time since I've flown last. The last time I did these flights was last February. I know that we're in the cycle of getting funding put in so I can come back down and do the project. So what I'd like to do now, I'm going to jump out of this. Let me hit escape real quick. And I'm going to show you some of the fun stuff. So this is actually the drone deploy software itself. And I'll ask you guys, pick a beach. Chappie Beach? Well, I heard Chappie first. I'm sorry. I'm going to go with Chappie. So here's Chappie Beach. So this is what the beach looks like. Now, if it's hard to see what it looks like, I'm going to click over on Plant Health. And this will show you a different color palette as to what area was flown, roughly speaking. Now, don't get excited when I show you plant health. I'm not showing you that certain plants are in good, healthy condition and certain plants are not. What you're seeing here, this color palette, is a NASA algorithm where the white light from the sun hits vegetation, and if it's relatively dry, it bounces out sort of reddish, and if it's relatively healthy, it bounces out sort of greenish. We still are having some doubts with this, even though people have been using it for a while. I would choose to use a drone with a thermal camera on it. Now, if you want to see where the pictures are located, I can click on Map Photos, and this shows me roughly how those transects looked. And embedded into this, there's a little globe picture right there. If I click on this globe, now you're getting a bird's eye view of the beach, which is kind of neat. I can zoom around. This isn't like the coolest stuff that it does yet, but even if I want to zoom in, I can start to zoom in on a certain area. What's useful for this, with this as a tool for Falmouth, is that if someone is in Falmouth that's concerned about the beaches can log into this, and you can look at any area of concern that you want. This data is here, and this data is your data to play with and explore. Me being a bit of an outsider and just doing the project, I don't know at each beach what the areas of concern are. I'm going to X out of this real quick. So I X out there. Now, let me get rid of these blue dots, these geotags. So I'll get rid of those right there. Actually, can I get a beach on the south side, like Falmouth High? Surf Drive, okay, because I like that because it's this way and not this way. It's a little easier to do comparisons. Let me go back here, let me go to Surf Drive. Okay, perfect. So again, I've done a couple of 360 panoramas at this beach also. Now, this big brown area that you see highlighted, if I were to click on that, what's sort of neat is that it's going to calculate, and it's going to say what the cubic yardage is as a volume. But you can see how sloppy this polygon shape is. You can see that I'm including the water. We haven't chosen the right tide to use. Is it high tide, mid tide, low tide? So I would ask one of the other experts on the table to say, okay, if we're going to measure the beach, let's measure like points that are right along maybe this tide mark right here. But this does show that when you put down ground control, we can get a pretty good idea of what the volume is. Now, the volume is useful, but I think it's more useful when you have something to compare it against. That's why I wanted to show this beach. Let me put on my old man glasses. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is up in the top center, you'll see that this is a flight that occurred on November 3rd of 2022. I can go back to the very first flight that I ever did, which is January 19th of 2021. And if I click on compare, and this is the sort of thing that you see on news websites online, like CNN or something like that, where you can see before and after with the storm. So now what can be done is we can zoom into an area. Oh, do you have an area? What? Oh, okay. So if I zoom in on this area, now you can start to go across and you can see how things have changed. And for me, as a bit of a layperson, I like to go up to the vegetative areas and I like to look at it. And I can say, okay, in 2021, the vegetation sort of had this shape right here, but now I can go like that and say, okay, well, maybe it's a little bit more grown, but you have to factor in also that it's summer versus winter, although that's another sort of winter. Let me go here. Let's see. So that's actually a considerable time later. And you can see just how different it is from 2021. Is that notable? Is it? Okay, good. So this is one of the things that we can do. Now, if you want to look at things like slope, and you can see there is a blue line right here that we put in, and I can get rid of these lines if I want to, but if I look at this slope line, which just went from some arbitrary point, let me put it from right there. Oops, let me do that. Let me move right to that point right there. Now, what I have is, and it's hard for some of you to see in the back of the room, but over here is a sort of a graph on the side, and it actually shows a solid line which represents the flight that occurred. This is the slope that is portrayed on January 19th of 2021, and then the dashed line is November 3rd of 2022. Now, there's a significant dip right here, and I can't explain what is causing that, but maybe it was something. I would probably move the line over to see if it correlated to the next spot. But it's a way that Falmouth can do comparisons on any point on any of these 8 beaches between any flights that occurred, like from a first flight or a second flight. So the other things that can be done, I think you just saw it briefly before. I can go to a certain area. I can grab a little volume tool. And with a volume tool, I could say, okay, I don't know how it's going to work on the vegetative areas as much. But if I were to do something like this here and close the box, now we have a calculation of the volume. So it shows that that vegetative area in 2021 was 825 cubic yards, and then November 2022, 879 cubic yards. So it increased by 54-ish yards, maybe, but it is a vegetative area. I find that getting volumes work better on non-vegetative areas because it's hard to see in between the plants. If it's an open area like the sand itself, it's pretty accurate. All right, let me move on. Let's see. Do you have any questions? Oh, we're going to do questions at the end? Okay. Let me see what I have left on my slides. Boom. So this is the side-by-side comparison. Oh, I chose this because this shows a target right here. This square shape right here, it's about the size of a baseball plate. It's about this big. I should have brought one today. It's called an arrow point, and it is a ground control point. I throw it on the ground. I throw 5 or 10 of these at each beach. I turn them on. They listen to satellites, and they record exactly where they are. And all I do is I just lift them off the ground, put them back in my trunk, and by the time I get home, they've uploaded to the cloud all of their data as to where they're located. So it's a much more cost-effective way as opposed to having a survey crew come out, which is going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars. I just show you how the volumes work and the beach slopes. Now, the one thing that's not being factored in here when I look at beach slopes is, and this is where I'm not a beach expert, but I feel like the slope of the beach is going to have an impact as to how fast it erodes, the angle that the wind is coming at it, and the direction of the tides coming at the beach is also going to impact the erosion. And also the quality of the sand itself, I think, has an impact on the erosion. So that's my presentation. I'll ask questions at the end, and thank you all very much. There you go.
So you're starting to see the kind of measurements that we can get and how we can use them as we worry about what we're losing in our beaches or where our beaches are actually growing, which we've also seen. And so, David, we look forward to some future work with you, I'm sure. At this point, I'd like to ask Rebecca Haney from CZM to come up and talk a little bit about what she can suggest we think about in terms of support and resources that might be available at the state level. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Barbara. So my background is as a coastal geologist, and I've been with the state over 29 years now. So I have, one of my jobs is to provide technical assistance to coastal communities, and I'm quite familiar with Falmouth beaches. I've been down, I've walked many of them with beach committee members and beach superintendents in the past. How you manage your beach makes a big difference in terms of how well it does in a storm. And storms are where you see your biggest change. And you don't want to be, you want to try to balance the human uses with the protection of the resources, because those beach and dune resources, the healthier they are, the better they can dissipate storm energy and stand up in a storm. And so there are some different management practices that you can change and evolve over time so that you have better survivability in a storm. And those beaches are also a buffer to what's behind them. So you've got a lot of roads and development and infrastructure that can all benefit from having as healthy of a beach as possible. So there's different goals that the town can decide what you want to prioritize and how you want to focus. If you're just trying to maintain what you have, then you can have some management recommendations for, you know, like Leslie said, we can talk about trying to improve the pathways so you don't have a storm pathway, making sure that there's maintenance and balancing those uses. If you're trying to improve resiliency and add volume, so your volume of your beaches and dunes and the amount of vegetative buffer you have provides more resiliency to what's behind it. So it's, you know, the town needs to choose which direction you want to go or what your goals are. And we can help to provide technical assistance looking at a specific beach and providing recommendations. We can also provide funding. We have a coastal resiliency grant program that the Minot project that Leslie talked about did come through for funding to redesign that area and develop a strategy for stabilizing that. So there's funding to do assessments, to develop plans, and to actually fund construction. So we strongly recommend that you come in and talk to us when you have a concept so that we can tell you what's more competitive versus less competitive, which does typically translate to, you know, where it's going to fall on the scale of, you know, when it gets reviewed by the committee. We do have a lot of requests. This year we got over $12 million in requests, and we don't have $12 million for the grant program, but we do have quite a bit available. We were able to do some significant nourishment this last fiscal year at Plymouth Long Beach. We funded, and there's Duxbury Beach was a project that Woods Hole Group designed. So there's a lot of very proactive projects that are going on. We do have a grant viewer online where you can look at past projects and what's been done. We also have resources that are available that are fact sheets about different techniques and what are the best practices for doing, for example, dune nourishment or beach nourishment, vegetation. So there's a lot of resources available. It depends on, you know, the direction the town wants to go, what you're interested in, and we can try to provide information and resources to help you further those goals. There's no right or wrong answer when it comes to what level of resiliency you want to plan for. It is a local choice. So when I drive along some of the areas like Surf Drive, you've got a lot of really low-lying beaches with very low dunes and some areas where there's not a lot of vegetation. That's not going to provide much of a buffer when storms come through. Your flood zones are pretty high. Thankfully, we haven't had a hurricane in a long time, knock on wood, because we don't need one anytime soon. But it's really important to think about what would happen in a storm, and can you think about what would happen to those roads. Is it realistic to try to protect it? What level storm could you protect it from? And what are the options, for possibly relocating? I know that's something that was looked at as part of the vulnerability assessment. Those are choices that the town has to make. Each town chooses whether to protect, maintain, or think about retreating in different places. So we are a resource, and we have a lot of different staff that provide, depending on the project, can provide help and assistance. And if our grant program isn't a good fit for the project, we can usually suggest another one that is. So for example, by doing the hazard mitigation plan that the town did, you make yourselves eligible for FEMA funding. And FEMA, each of their grant programs has things that they're designed that are more competitive and less competitive, just like any program. And some of it is about understanding what's going to be competitive with FEMA and what's not. Right now, they tend to be funding more of the critical infrastructure protection projects. So, for example, a wastewater treatment facility in Hull that is in the flood zone and gets a lot of flooding. That's something that's moving forward for FEMA funding right now. So we can try to give you examples or give you information about the different options, just depending on what your concerns are. So we can provide technical assistance to the beach committee. We do to the Conservation Commission as they request. DPW in the past, so different town departments have asked for assistance. So we're a resource, and we're happy to help. I don't have any formal presentation, but I'm happy to take questions when we get to that.
They have to hear you on the TV. We are taping this for television, and so when he came running in the back because you walked away from the microphone and they couldn't hear you while they were taping, so we have to be cognizant of that. At this time, I'm going to take public comment, and I want to remind you all that the limit is 1 2-minute comment per person at this point. I would hope that those of you who want to say something are bringing what you came here as concerns or hopes, and share that again with the beach committee so that they will take that into what they're considering for advising the select board in October when they meet with them. So would somebody like to make a public comment at this time? And please just state your name when you do that. Anybody? Okay. So would anyone at this point like to have asked a question, and they want to just state the question for one of the speakers? Was there somebody who had something they wanted to ask?
Hi, I'm Gilda Geist. I'm a reporter for the Falmouth Enterprise, and I'm wondering, I know you were saying that the town can access the drone data. Is that available to members of the public in town? And if so, how can we access it?
So the license agreement that we have for drone deploy allows us to give out only a handful of unique IP address, users. So the folks that would be in Falmouth, I imagine, are going to be just people that work in the town, that they'll have a unique login to access the website to look at the data.
Anyone else have a question that they would like to have posed? Okay. Would you state your name, please?
My name's Stephen Saunders from Walker Street, and I wanted to know which beach of the ones mentioned is at most risk of losing in the near future. That's right.
If you ask the beach committee, we would ask you which beach other than Falmouth Heights doesn't have anything wrong going and losing anything. So, right, we're concerned about everything right now, and anyone who walks the beach after any given storm is seeing what we're all seeing, which is I think we had a presentation by David at our beach committee meeting, and he gave us a measurement of a South Shore beach. Just to put this in perspective, we talk about depth of a beach, but we also have to think about the deepness of the sand, right? And we've all noticed as we enter Minot Beach that we've started to have to drop down from where we used to walk in. You actually have like a little cliff now. Well, he gave us a measurement in 1 year's time that showed something like 18 inches of depth taken away. Think of that. Think of that. We think about, well, Chappie's shorter and we can only fit 35 towels on it now, but we don't think about the actual beach getting taken away on the top of the sand. So that's what we're looking at, and you're going to hear a lot more from the beach committee about first line of defense, and you heard today some discussion about the dunes and the purpose of dunes, and it isn't just to keep a beach so you can go there in the summer. It's really to save our town's infrastructure and our town's real estate and roads and so on. So we're very concerned about it, and we're starting to look, and that's why we have this meeting today. Anyone else have a question? Yes.
Terry Saunders, Walker Street. Where you said there was only 5 people that might have access, I'd love to see a presentation or something put on either FCTV or your own groups that we could also just see more detail. It's very interesting.
Take that under advisement. Thank you. Anyone else? Betsy? Make sure you see.
My name's Betsy Gladfelder. So Barb, we're talking about a very short term right now, so far. How much are we gaining or losing each week? Are you also looking at a longer term strategy, knowing that there's going to be sea level rise and some of our parking is going to disappear?
And that certainly is, we talk about short-term and long-term, and in the beach management plan, which we'll be looking at now in small groups, we have noted that it even spells out where after every storm, where the DPW should go and scrape up the sand and deliver the sand to what area of the beach on each beach. It was very specific in addressing short-term. As far as long-term, we have had a long debate in the town of Falmouth, haven't we, about what we believe is going to happen and where we're in trouble. And the first study, I think, that was released, when did we release the study that said we were in real trouble and needed to have the bike path raised and the roads down there? Yeah, so can you remember when that was, Leslie? When we had that study come out that we actually...
The vulnerability study was before, it was probably around 2000, and then we did the surf drive study in 2022, I believe. So when we have all that data, Betsy, that just shows from the Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model, that shows inundation, probabilities of inundation, of all the infrastructure. Oh.
I'm sorry, Betsy.
I know we have those data in town. My question is, are you in the process of developing plans as to where's parking going to be? How are dunes going to like Wood Neck Beach is a good example. That dune system should be moving across the parking lot.
Yeah.
So those kinds of questions.
So I think the first thing we wanted to start with is how well did this 2008 plan address where we are today and what's not been accomplished from that with recommendations? Then we want to move to what's missing and we really have to do, or what data do we need to gather to make better decisions and advise the select board of what they need to be concerned about and change. So we're really, this is such a huge topic, and it's a lot to bite off for a volunteer group, but we see it, we're also passionate about it, and we realize it's probably the most important thing we can work on now that we have a full staff of lifeguards and PAs, and we got through a summer really well. We move on to the nitty-gritty of our real physical plant, and that's what we're looking at. So yes, Betsy, short answer, yes.
Thank you. Liz Beardsley. Wondering how and to what extent habitat value and needs are being factored into the planning.
I mean, we definitely quantified that in the 2008 plan. So which areas were or are estimated priority habitat for rare and endangered species. And there are rules and regulations about what you can and can't do in those areas, and the town follows that, very well. Moving forward, I think that should be something that the beach committee considers, and maybe even, enhancing areas that could provide habitat for those species would be something that should be discussed and considered. Thanks, Rebecca.
Yeah, I can add to that some of the enhancement activities that were recommended in the plan that would provide you with more storm damage protection would also enhance habitat. So there's a lot of opportunity. You just need to decide where you want to prioritize, where you want to start focusing on. And there's recommendations in there. There's opportunities to get grants to do that design and move forward. And you would be looking at both. The resource areas help enhance the habitat. And whenever we give a grant, we also work with the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program to make sure that their recommendations for enhancing habitat are followed. So we can guide you on that as well.
Okay. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Jeff Whittle. I represent a group called Falmouth Associates, and this is probably a question for Rebecca Haney. I'm just wondering, what are resources available to private groups that have beachfront that want to try and improve it and maintain it? And in particular, it's issues of erosion and loss of dunes, particularly along Surf Drive.
So there are some online resources with recommendations and fact sheets on how to approach it. We don't have financial grants available to private groups, but certainly there's information we can point you to. We do have a shoreline change project that has historic information. The Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model is now available online as well. That gives you some information about future inundation. It doesn't talk about future erosion, but it does talk about the inundation. So there's a lot of pieces of information available. Our website has a lot of information about assessing vulnerabilities and tools for you with resources, but there aren't any specific grants.
Okay, yes.
Peter McConaty, Director of Public Works. Just my observations, I've been with the town for 17 years, and my observations is the plan of the town. As for Public Works, we have many projects throughout town, East Falmouth, the Heights, West Falmouth, North Falmouth. And typically what we find at Public Works is we go to the areas that have been damaged, that's been damaged by a storm, have been damaged for many years, and those are the areas we concentrate on, but there's not a plan for nourishment, for a town-wide nourishment, like rebuilding the dunes, exactly what you said. And when we talk about short-term and long-term projects, when we do these types of projects, the filing and the permitting that's required between local, state, and federal, you're usually up to several years, 2 years plus, to get a project underway. And some of the other projects that have been mentioned about some of our bridge projects have taken longer. So when we look at the short-term, the mid-term, and the long-term projects that we work at, it takes just several years just to get to that point. Even if you go to town meeting, you get funding, it takes several years to get the permitting and the design and then you go out to construction. And everybody knows that the construction costs since 2020 have been 20%, 30%. So what we're finding is contractors today, they're starting to stabilize, starting to come around and stabilize, but we're finding that contractors and materials today are 20% higher, 30% higher for projects. So when we go to town meeting, and we go for, typically when we go to town meeting, recently we've been asking for design funding. We get the design and the permitting, and then once we get the design and the permitting, we come back and we ask for construction funding. Because when you're talking 2 years wait time to start a construction project, the construction materials and contractors, typically our projects are large projects, and you need the large contractors. So it wouldn't be the smaller contractors. So that's just something to keep in mind as we go forward here. When we start looking at these projects, take even the smallest of projects in the coastal areas, no matter where in town, takes several years. We have 60 miles of coastline in Falmouth, and in all areas of Falmouth get hit. So that's what I've found with Public Works.
And 154 osprey nests. And Mark, thanks to Mark. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I have a number of people in this room that are extremely helpful resources for the beach committee, and I have put them into groups, and they're going to meet as a group to address parts of the beach management plan and actually be able to come back to us and at about 5:40 with thoughts on the section that they're going to be working on that I'm going to assign each small group. So this is going to be an actual working time for the next 35 to 40 minutes, which a number of you in this room are going to be participating in. Those of you that are not, I invite you to take a chair, sit on the edge of the group, and listen to the dialogue and the way that they're going through it, and get some of the information that they're sharing in this small group. And you'll see the process as it plays out. So please don't feel that we aren't including you, but we can't allow everybody to take part in the dialogue. We're looking for specific answers to a group of questions in these different sections of the plan. There are copies of the plan on the back table for those of you who would like to have one to look at for section 4, which is what we're going to focus on for this next amount of time. And I'll be handing each group 2 different pieces of poster paper that they'll be filling out, and we'll be putting those up on the board when we come back together. So I hope that you'll hear me out while I assign the different groups. Okay. So, Peter McConerty, you and Maggie and Chuck and Nancy and Mike and Trish and Scott and Sandy, representing community preservation, are going to get together in a group with your chairs, and you are going to be tackling section 4.1. And each group that I'm putting together here, your goal is look at 4.1, come up with questions that haven't been answered in your group that you have about these items, and then on the one piece of paper, write your questions. On the second piece of paper, on the white piece of paper, write what you think we really need to focus on as high priority coming out of that section, okay? So that's the first group. Section 2, 4.2. That will be Doug, Peter Johnson-Staub, Jim Grady, Heather, if you will please handle 4.2. Okay? Section 4.3. That will be Joe, Mark K, back there, and David, because that's a lot about monitoring, okay? And Brooke, Mark, and Brooke and Mark, I was going to have Jim Grady kind of float between you and his other group because you really need his help in this one too. That would be 4.4, okay? That's the routine maintenance with, which is very important. And then Betsy, Rebecca, Leslie, and Lynn, 4.5, restoration. And I think that's where we're going to try, what we're going to try and tackle today. So, did everyone get what group they're in, Lynn? And so on the back table, there are some, is that where they are? There are these really great grids that you can use that look like this, and they actually have comment areas you can use, and they go through each of the sections. So if you want to just take one of those for your group and have one person be ready to get up and do a presentation at the end of this. So we'll come back together at 20 to 6. So just form your little groups wherever you would like, in a circle, at a table, however you would like. And I'll be coming around and giving you markers and paper to work with. Okay, so we're going to spend the rest of this, we have 2 parts left. We're going to share what each group came up with for questions and highlights and things they hope we'll focus on. And then I'm going to take one more round of public comment based on what you've seen, what you've heard, and what you're hoping you'll see us do going forward. So I'm going to start with the spokesperson for 4.1, and I will hand off the mic.
Thank you, Barbara. Once again, Peter McConerty, Public Works Director. I was working with the group of 4.1. We did have some very talented individuals working in that group. We had the beach superintendent, we had staff from the MES, and we had staff from the beach department, so I think we did very well. But these were based on recommended management activities for Falmouth, for the management activities for the Falmouth beaches. So I'm just going to quickly use this book to go through the highlights of each section, and then we can go through each one. Maggie, you can take away anytime you would like to do this. So activity 4.1.1 was management and planning level activities. So it basically was, it said, you know, what is the town doing right now for the responsible departments to identify and discuss shortcomings of our existing system that we have. So when we have during the year, what do we do now, and what can we do to improve that system? And like I said, we had Public Works, we had MES, and we had beaches, and we had the town manager also. So we had a good crew. But the 4.1.1, I think the biggest thing that we came out of, and that we've found out in Public Works, and I think across the board, is staffing. So we tried to look at staffing in town, and they started looking at funding and salaries or what have you in town. And I can speak for Public Works to say, since I call it the COVID years, I don't particularly think it was COVID, but since basically 2020, we had a hard time and a shortage with bringing in staff for the beach maintenance. So Maggie runs the beaches. She has all the lifeguards, the staff. She does the parking lot, the attendants. And Public Works, Jim Grady, who was our floater in a couple of groups, Jim Grady was, he's the one that manages the staff. So during the week, how do we take care of that? And Jim's been very good at implementing ways because we usually get 8 staff, but we haven't been able to get them. So he's been good at switching times around. And actually one thing, Jim picked up, everyone thinks the town department, other than the beaches, outside of the beaches, is Monday to Friday. So Jim said, well, I'm killing my overtime, so what am I going to do to be able to do this with my staff and with the seasonals? So he has some staff working Monday through Saturday, and other staff working Tuesday through Sunday, so we have coverage, and he has coverage of the staff on the overtime. So it does save us with the overtime portion, so come May and June, we're not scrambling. But it has become a problem, just try to find our staffing. We have 8 staff, and 2020, 21, 22, we only had several people come in, and 23, I think we got 4 people come in, whatever. But what happens, they usually come in around Memorial Day, and they leave the end of July, beginning of August. They're going back to college. They want a few weeks off, or they have to travel to go back to college. So you have the shoulder seasons that we have problems trying to staff the beaches. Everyone's still going to the beaches, and everyone still expects the beaches to be clean and running, and everything, the Falmouth nice. But we've been running into problems with that. I don't know if you have anything, if it's the same or anything more. Okay, all right. You want? Okay. Sorry, Maggie. So 4.1.2, that was the biggest one out of 4.1.2. 4.1.2 is a record-keeping system, all right? So we've already, Public Works, this was developed in 2008. Public Works in 2012 did a ViewWorks program. So we do track all our programs they do right now. We track all our work orders. We track all the work that we do. During a storm, we're not so good at it because we're trying to open up roads. We're trying to open up the beaches or whatever needs to be done. So that could be a little bit of work. But we do have that implemented for the 4.2. 4.3 is prepare a spring letter to the Conservation Commission. This is something that, Jim's in the office. I want to keep track of time. But in the past, we have been able to work with conservation, and we had allowable, this is what you can do every year. I don't know if it's still the way right now because, things get more complicated with the beaches during the summertime and everything else that's going on. But that's something that we could work on with the Conservation Commission. Every year we do the same thing, for the most part. Do we want to continue to do this? We'll let you know that we're doing it, but if something happens or an emergency or anything else, we want to be able to get out there and just be able to do that and have a notification to them when we need to. 4.1.4, we didn't have a lot to do that. 4.1.3, one thing that was brought up from the MES is they do a lot of dredging. And when they do a lot of dredging, they usually put all the sediment and the materials on an adjacent beach, could be a private property or adjacent beach. And what they're looking at is the possibility of getting a dredging booster, be able to pull that material out from wherever they are and put it on another town beach that's down the stream, down east somewhere else. So that is I think would be very beneficial for the town from Woods Hole all the way out to East Falmouth. 4.1.5 is maintain active permits. We do that right now. Larger projects, we have to go through the state permit, but we do that right now. 4.1.6 is evaluate a large storm response protocol. So during large storms, Public Works, I'll be honest with you, beaches, it depends on what time of year it is, but beaches is just one of the items that we're looking at. Our main focus is we got to keep the roads open, the bridges open for the police and fire to be able to get through. So beaches is just one small item that we're looking at. We're looking at the whole town. We work very closely with fire and police and MES, but the beaches is just one small concept. So it could be something that could use a little bit of work with. 4.1.8, the concessions, so the health, what we do up there with the food vendors at the concessionaires with the mobile. I know we make them, at the end of the year, we make them clean out, paint floors, get all their equipment out of there. But as far as propane and some of the other, if there's dangerous, whatever's up there in those buildings, to have them cleaned out because it's closed for 10 months. It's open for 12 weeks, but it's closed for 10 months. 4.1.12, that was a 4.1.12, real quick, was when we should evaluate this plan. This plan was developed, and I'm going to be honest, and I'll tell you about myself. This plan was developed in 2008. I had actually, Mark Kaspasic, I'm sorry, I actually stole your copy because I didn't have a copy. So in 2009, I stole the conservation copy of it. But the last time I opened this before this week was about 2012, 2013. So it's been a long time. So we recommend maybe every 2 years being able to do something and going through this beach plan. Things change. There's a lot of things in this manual that we have finished and been completed and finished. So I think other than that, everything else, I think everything else is good. But as far as the management practices of it, for the most part, if I had to give a grade to it, I'd give us probably a B plus, somewhere in that range. Yeah. I wouldn't give us an A. But I'd give us maybe a B or a B plus. And just one so everyone knows, with Public Works, with Fire, with Police, with Beaches, with MES, we all have a very good working relationship together. You don't want to be going into a storm or something and meeting someone for the first time or someone you haven't dealt with in a year or 2 years. So we do have a very good working relationship with all the departments. So if something comes up, we all try to help each other out. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So 4.2, let's go right through the list. Conduct an annual, oh, excuse me. So the first one's 4.2, infrastructure, maintenance, and improvement activities. The first one, upgrade the existing wastewater disposal system. That's already done. The next one's relocate municipal water line. That's also done. Develop a long-range plans to eliminate direct discharge of stormwater. That's not done. We've made that priority number 2 because we really haven't addressed it yet, so there's going to be some planning involved in that. Long-range direct discharge. Yep, renovate and upgrade the bathhouse concessions. The beach committee's already been looking at what possible ideas might come up, and there's a working group that's already working on that.
Sure. So very briefly, town manager appointed a working group comprised of staff members and Nancy Queeg, beach committee member. So we're looking at the 2 bathhouses at Old Silver and Surf Drive, and looking at, an emergency plan for if there's a storm damage, what's the plan for immediate operations and how we prepare for that. And then we're also looking at long-term, if we reach a point where we can no longer maintain a facility, particularly at Surf Drive, which is the more vulnerable of them, what operations do we keep there? Is it possible that we could be relocating the offices further away from the water where they're less vulnerable? Talking about eliminating any permanent structures for food concessions in the long term, and just having a mobile food truck. Which just leaves us with the bathrooms and, what is the best solution there? Is it fully portable, somewhat portable, but it's left there until there's really a problem? So a lot of work to do, but then we do have design funding. I guess this is there's a capital plan is going to be presented to the select board on Monday, and one of the considerations there is money for a feasibility study for those bathhouse relocations.
Thank you. So the next is seagull deterrent at Old Silver Beach. So there was a little confusion about that because there is a seagull deterrent on the roof of the building, but I think that this might mean that we want to cover the sitting area as well to keep the birds away. Was that the idea? It's only 2008, can't you remember? Okay, well, so I think we're probably going to investigate some kind of cables, fishing line or whatever, over the tables, because as Heather just pointed out, she had a sandwich stolen right out of her hand the other day. So, the next is 4.26, relocate access stairs at Chapquoit Beach. So Jim Grady says he can do that. We just have to determine where they would go. Not sure where that would be, but I guess the idea is that there's not much beach left at the bottom of the stairs, so they're not very useful there. Activity 4.27, replace handrails on the beach access stairways with corrosion-resistant materials. We have that here on priority number 3, which might be, maybe it's not just replace the handrails, because when the concrete falls apart, it's harder to replace, so Jim's thinking maybe it's going to be wood, so he'll be looking into that. Yeah, just, well, Old Silver and Megansett possibly, I think. It's definitely Old Silver, but I think Megansett needs it too. Okay, that could change. Okay, activity 4.28, maintain and upgrade the natural surface parking areas. So that's a regular maintenance thing that the Highway Department does every year at Minot Beach and Mill Road. The Heights Beach has been paved, so that's no longer an issue. The other two will probably not be paved in the future because of their location, but they do get maintenance every year. Install and maintain, 4.29, install and maintain barriers at beach access points. It's not really a big problem, but it is an observation that is probably would make sense at the end of Old Silver, where the chute is, the back parking area. It's a little isolated, and maybe there should be a gate of some sort there. In Megansett, Jim has put a couple of posts and a cable, and it's a highly visible location, so that might suffice for now. 4.210, relocate storage vaults outside the primary resource areas. We talked about that, and Jim also has a plan for that. Maybe Jim should be up here, but so those are improvised septic tanks that Don Hoffer ingeniously converted to use as storage. So Jim's going to look into putting those in a better location and putting some stainless steel doors on them so that he's constantly not fixing the wood doors that are on there now. 4.211, install seasonal shower towers. Again, that one's done, I think. I don't know if there's any locations left that need them, but I think they're done.
There are 2. We don't have a shower tower sorry. We currently don't have a shower tower at Grews Pond at Goodwill Park and the Mill Road extension of Surf Drive, but every other beach and beach parking lot has one, if not more, shower towers since this plan was made 15 years ago.
Thank you. There's been a lot of progress on this. I was surprised to see how much we actually have done. It's good. 4.3. Yep. 4.3 is conduct annual condition surveys of all coastal engineering structures at the public beaches. Oh,
Thanks, Jim. Thank you. For the activities of 4.3.1, we had a member of the conservation, Mark, was helping us, and David from our drone studies. And recommendation is for conducting biannual beach profile and photography. Well, we've realized that since 2008, there's all kinds of data that can be gained from the drones themselves, including the photography. So we have here that we should, the questions we have, should the older imagery converted to the current equipment that is available? Instead of sending airplanes up to take pictures of beaches or the coastline, should we just simply continue the drones as we're doing now, which gathers both the imagery and the data at the same time? So we believe that there should be contracts issued for at least 2 to 3 years at a time, so there's some continuity going on and not have it a question as to whether we're going to continue to do it, because it's the only subjective data that we can gather. As far as what structures, the 4.32 is basically us monitoring structures. And so we should be determining what structures are going to remain on the beaches and what structures should not remain on the beaches that are actually going to cost us money in the long run. And so we're talking about whether we go to removable structures, as was mentioned before, or whether we just simply don't replace structures. where they're going to get knocked down. The biggest question on 4.33 continues to be what type of fencing is good to be used on the beaches. Are we doing it for, retaining the sand and keeping the dunes built up? Are we doing it to protect the wildlife that are on the beaches? Where should we use fencing and what type of fencing should be used? And that needs to be determined quickly because we need to replace a lot of the damaged fencing, and there's no reason that we should be guessing one beach is different from another. We should keep them all either for the habitat, and we have experts, Audubon and Heritage, that can give us guidance on what's best in what areas. But we need to have some consistency from one part of town to another to give DPW a break as far as what they help construct or what they allow and what they don't allow. As far as 4.3.4, which is a discussion of aerial photography should be done on a annual or semi-annual or even basis, we believe that aerial photography as an expense to the town should be removed, and we go back to what we're doing with the drones, because we'll get the same kind of results. We'll get better results, I should say. So that's our conclusion in that regard as to whether we do that. So that's basically what we came up with. And who's 4-4?
Hi, I'm Brooke McMillan, the assistant superintendent. So ours, I felt like was pretty easy because it is done, and it is the routine maintenance activities. This addresses the preseason maintenance, postseason maintenance. The only question we had, which was already asked before, was the DPW staff projection. Could always use more help. Highlights, we have great interdepartmental communication cooperation, and I hate making those calls or texts at 5:30 on a weekend, and it always gets done. We could not do this and have the beach department run efficiently without interdepartmental cooperation. But everything on this list in 4.4 is always completed. Public beach openings, lifeguard stands, buoys, placing parking attendant booths, making sure the lots are safe, fencing, walkways, stairs. The beach raking has been phenomenal this year. It always is, but I feel like our new rake really has made such a difference in our beach. So that's really kind of all that Mark and I had. 4.5. It's you, Lynn.
Hi, I'm Lynn Shad. So we had the section of restoration activities. It's a real, as everybody in this room knows, it's a really big issue. Probably some of the biggest takeaways we had was going back and reassessing all the beaches in this plan, the 2008 plan. It seemed like it was Surf Drive, Chappie, and Minot that we focused on, but a lot of time has transpired between now and then, so it might be a good idea for us to reassess where all the beaches are and reprioritize them. There's no surprise also that the big issue is where is the fund, one is being able to get permits, design permits and permits go through in a timely fashion. So we have to work on that, and then also getting funding for some of these projects. With regards to the individual sections, we had all of we were, for the most part, we were, I guess it's actually probably 50-50. Some of them were in progress and some of them were completed. The sand fencing was in progress. Dune restoration is also in progress for Surf Drive, Bristol Beach, and Minot. Developing intermediate and long-term beach nourishment programs. This is where I was referring to needing to reassess all of the beaches, but we don't have to do one to try to continue moving forward with the original priority, which was the Surf Drive Beach project. So we could probably do, we can try to do a reassessment and moving the Surf Drive Beach project forward, hopefully simultaneously. The utilized sand dredge from Fresh River, that is that's in progress, but additional money is needed to improve the management. So one of the things that came out of our discussion here was, for those beaches that we have been able to put sand on, it's only like a short-term fix, and because sand constantly moves, and we have storms, and we have sea level rise, like the sand just gets washed away. So we need to be thinking about larger volumes, bigger projects, in order to be able to make meaningful changes to our beaches. Number 5 is in progress. That's also utilizing the sand dredged from Bournes Pond and Green Pond, as well as Eel River beach nourishment. That's in progress. I have a note here, requiring some updated permits or existing permits to go through. And then 6, 7, and 8 had to do with vegetation is an important part of sort of holding the sand in place. And one of the suggestions that was made, there are other communities, that have volunteer revegetation programs. The grasses are relatively inexpensive to acquire, and we could try to organize Girl Scout troops and other volunteers to sort of help every year to revegetate the beaches. So that might be something that we could work on that doesn't cost a lot of money. Otherwise, yeah, that was 6, 7, and 8, but I'm sort of going back and forth a little bit between the two. If we can prioritize getting some grant funding for Surf Drive, that would be the recommendation at this point in time. And then consider living shoreline alternatives for appropriate sites, which is basically the vegetation that we talked about. So I guess to sort of sum it all up is there's some things that we can do on a short-term basis, but we really have to start thinking about prioritizing which beaches need the most help and what that help would be. It could be, we have to determine what level of priority that each individual beach has. So, is there anything? Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I'll just quickly say some of the questions that came up in 4.7 when I went through it, and that is, do we have somebody who is finalizing and submitting Falmouth multi-hazard mitigation plans to become eligible for FEMA grants? Do you know? It's done. That is done. Okay, good. So those are in place. And then the other question that I wanted to bring up is, anybody currently in town hall working with someone to write grants for any of these other than the Minot Road project, for example? Do you know of someone who's like looking at some of these potential projects and writing grants? Peter? No? Okay. I just wanted to bring that up and.
So we don't have a dedicated person to do grant writing in general. So we've done some specific grants with specific department lead sponsors, such as the MVP program through the state vulnerability program, the Surf Drive study. But no, we don't have a dedicated person or a person with a portion of their time cut out just for that purpose.
So that would be like, if we did get the coastal resiliency person, that would be one of those responsibilities, for example.
Precisely, and I think Leslie wanted to make a comment as well.
Yes. Leslie?
I was just going to add, until you get that coastal resiliency person, I mean, that's also a service that Woods Hole Group provides. So we, if you guys have an idea that you think could be funded by a grant, let's talk about it, and we'll help you put together the application and and, hopefully you'll get it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's a service we
Okay,
provide.
that's really good help to know, and that's where we are going. I just want to say, I'm going to ask for public comment one more time for anyone having a comment about the process tonight or their hopes going forward. But I will personally say thank you to all of you for giving of your time like this, and I hope that, I've always been an educator. I hope tonight was as educational for you as it has been for me. I loved going around and listening to the different groups and seeing the kinds of discussions going on. And I think this is where Falmouth is best, when we put a lot of different expertise and heads together and we find how to get from A to B. And if we can do it with a simple Osprey platform, we can do it with our beaches. So who would like to make a comment? Betsy.
So I just want to make a comment, and I want to thank DPW and MES and Conservation for, it's amazing. I remember when this grant first came out, and I remember having a meeting at the, what do we call it, the community center, the rec center. And to see all that has been accomplished is real. There's a lot more that needs to be done. We all need that. I mean, this is a dynamic shoreline, but Peter, you've done a good job, and everybody who works with you, Chuck through the years, Mark through the years, that's how a lot of stuff's gotten done.
Anybody else comment? Okay. Thank you all, and again, thank you for your time. Write any other comments that you didn't get a chance and they come to you later. Just write them to us. Thank you.